All right, think about this. You pull up to a red light, you check for traffic, you make that right turn. You probably do it every single day without a second thought, right? It's just second nature. But what if I told you that simple little move has this wild history? A history tied to a global crisis and a huge debate that is absolutely heating up right now. So today, we're going to dig into the really surprising story of turning on red. Yep, you see the red, you stop, look both ways, and you go. Seems simple enough, right? But here's the kicker. The whole reason this law is even on the books, it has almost nothing to do with making traffic flow better, and it has everything to do with saving gas during a moment of, well, total international panic. So for most of us here in the US, it's just pure muscle memory. It really feels like it's always been this way, doesn't it? But okay, before we get into the why of it all, let's just do a quick refresher on what the rule actually is. Okay, so the rule itself is super simple, and it seems completely logical, right? I mean, if no one's coming, why on earth would you just sit there and wait? It feels so efficient, it saves time, it keeps traffic moving. But, and this is a big but, this idea that seems so obvious to us now, it wasn't always the law. In fact, for a really long time, it wasn't the law in most of the country. So where did it come from? Well, the story of the right turn on red isn't some brilliant innovation from traffic engineers. No, it's a story of pure necessity. It was born from a moment when the entire world felt like it was quite literally running out of gas. And this timeline, man, it really tells the story. You can see how the rule just explodes onto the scene. For decades, it was kind of this fringe idea, mostly just a thing out on the West Coast. But then look at that huge jump in the 70s. The 1973 oil crisis hits, gas prices go through the roof, and all of a sudden, just sitting at a red light, that went from being your own personal annoyance to a national problem. The government figured, hey, letting cars turn on red will save precious fuel. And just like that, by 1980, it went from a quirky regional rule to a full-on national mandate. And oh, they were serious about it. This was not some friendly suggestion. No. It was a straight-up requirement tied to money. The federal government passed this thing called the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, which basically told the states, look, if you want federal cash for your conservation programs, you have to let your drivers turn on red. So think about that. The rule was pushed nationwide mostly to save a little gas, not really to make traffic safer or flow better. So that one decision, born out of a crisis, made turning on red a totally standard part of American driving. But here's something you might not realize. It also makes us kind of weird on the global stage. Just take a look at this breakdown. Yeah, it's pretty common across North America, but in most of Europe, most of Asia, honestly most of the world, a red light means stop, period, full stop, no exceptions. Which means our little daily driving habit isn't some universal rule. It's a pretty distinct regional thing. But, there are some really cool exceptions out there. Get this. The rule was first introduced in communist East Germany back in '78. And at first, West Germans kind of made fun of it, calling it the socialist right turn. But then, after reunification, the rule turned out to be so popular and just so practical that they didn't get rid of it. Nope, they adopted it across the entire country. How about that? And you see other countries experimenting in their own ways, too. Like in places like Switzerland and France, they've taken this same logic of turning on red, but they've only applied it to bicycles at certain intersections. It's a really fascinating peek into how different places are trying to strike that balance between keeping things moving and keeping people safe. So we've got this rule that was born from a fuel crisis, and it's become this big symbol of convenience for drivers. But that convenience came with a price. It had some pretty serious unintended consequences, and it kicked off a debate that started almost the second the law went nationwide. And this is where the story gets really serious. An early study, back in 1984, came out with some absolutely shocking numbers. In places where turn on red was adopted, crashes with pedestrians shot up by 60%. And crashes with bicyclists, they doubled, 100% increase. And a big reason why is pretty simple when you think about it. Drivers who are turning right are almost always looking left, for cars, not to their right, for people who might be in the crosswalk. But it's not a simple one-sided debate. A study from 2002 published in the ITE journal came to a completely different conclusion. Their argument was, hey, wait a minute. If you force all turns to happen only on a green light, you're going to create way more congestion and more conflicts between cars, which could actually lead to more accidents. It just goes to show you the safety data here is really complex. It's not clear-cut at all. And because of that exact debate, and because there's this big new focus on pedestrian safety, the whole story of turning on red is entering a brand new chapter. Something that was once mandated by the federal government is now being seriously rethought, but this time at the local level. And you can see this shift happening right now, in the real world. I mean, New York City has famously banned it for decades, but now other big cities are jumping on board. Washington, D.C. is banning it citywide, Atlanta is getting rid of it in its downtown and midtown areas. And Seattle, they're now making no turn on red the default setting for any new intersection. So yeah, this is not some dusty historical debate. This is happening right now on our streets. And that brings us to the big question, the one we're all left with. We have this rule that was created to save a few drops of gas back in the 1970s. And now it's being weighed against the safety of people walking and biking on our streets in the 2020s. So it really forces us all to ask ourselves, is that little bit of convenience at the corner still worth the potential cost? What do you think?